about to hear a revolution in talk radio, Liberty Talk Radio, where the critical thinking will defrag your mind of propaganda-ridden viruses induced by mass media news programming. No BS here, just the facts.
And now we present to you America's quintessential iconoclastic anomaly. Wow. In talk radio, your host, Joe Cristiano.
Welcome, everyone, to yet another edition of Liberty Talk Radio. We are pleased today to have as our guest, a returning guest, Andy Sutton, economist from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He writes a blog on the condition of our economic affairs and how to protect yourself. Andy formerly was an investment advisor, and he dropped out of the system because of he recognized that the entire financial system is so corrupt that he was unable to adequately advise people in a truly honest manner. He would have to tell them how corrupt the system was that they were investing in, basically. And I hope he'll correct me if I'm saying this incorrectly. But and as a result, he has gone on a mission now to expose the rot and corruption within our entire financial system and what we should be aware of. So we're so pleased to have Andy with us to enlighten us and tell us what's the latest and the greatest in the world of corrupt financial whatever is going on. Andy, thank you for being on our program.
Hey, Joe, how you doing?
Okay.
Thank you very much for having me back. It's great being here.
Now, Andy, your last blog, and I do encourage everyone to go to andysutton.com and read his blogs. Andy, I'll be honest with you, you are the best writer out there. I enjoy them because they have just that right element of sarcasm, of humor, and of insight that makes it truly enjoyable but and understandable at the same time. And too often, I lose it because I'm not as educated maybe as the person who's writing it. You're a lot more educated than me, but you gear your writings to the average person who is not an economist but makes you understand the economics of the situation. Now, on your last blog, you talked about the bail-ins. Well, there are bail-ins, there are bailouts, and if you don't mind, I need a bailout also. Could you help us out?
Well, this is not so much really a bailout or a bail-in per se. I guess you could call it a bail-in, but it's a situation that it's already happened in several places. But what you had happen here a week or so ago, week and a half ago, is the Greek government passed some laws. We've heard this many times before, that basically says that they can take money out of the government, the country's pension systems, and use it to make good on the debts that they have to pay to the IMF. These pension assets can be used to purchase Greek bonds, so they can be used to basically levitate the Greek debt system that's going on, used to pay back the IMF, which is an absolute joke because here's how this works, all right? The IMF comes into a struggling country like Greece, and they say, it's worse than the mob. With the mob, the guy comes in and says, hey, I give you $100,000 at 50% due in a month, and if you don't deliver, I'll break your legs, right?
Oh, you know my Uncle Louie, yeah.
There you go. All right, Uncle Louie. No picking at people, but that's what they do.
Right, exactly.
Well, you know what? You go back, you pay the $150,000, and it's over, right?
Right, exactly.
Well, this isn't how the IMF works. The IMF comes in and they say, we'll give you $10 billion, and you have to. And we know you really need $50 billion or whatever it is. All right, we'll give you this money, but in order to get the next $10 billion, you have to repay X number of dollars. So there's always that they pull out of the economy. They're basically stealing the labor of the Greek people, and it's partially the Greek people's fault because Europe's had this laziness, welfare.
Right.
United States post 1965 mentality.
Right.
For a long time. Big vacations, very little production, lots of government benefits, welfare, blah, 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 blah. Bread and circuses, basically. So, the chickens have come home to roost. And so now, of course, the IMF, they love this. They can come in there, and the IMF's a cartel. And some of the other members, you might recognize them, are the World Bank,
right? The
European Central Bank, the Bank of England, the federal, you get the idea, the unfederal not reserve, you get the point, all right? It's all a cartel.
Right.
And it's not a conspiracy theory either. The next person I hear says that, I'm going to give them one of these here. Because it's not a conspiracy theory. This is what they do. So they go in there and they latch on. And they know, these guys have economists that work for them. They're 10 times smarter than you and me put together. And they have all their little fancy math and computers and models and blah, blah, blah. And they know that there's no way that the Greek government or people are ever going to generate enough output to, one, sustain themselves, and then, two, to pay back these crazy loans.
Right.
So they basically have them. It's kind of like the credit card company does in this country. You've got the poor slob that, gets himself into trouble for whatever reason, or just, likes to live beyond his means. And they're like that. They're like a leech right on you, and they don't let you go. I mean, you got them for life most of the time. And this is how it works with the IMF. They're no different than a credit card company. So think of them as, a bigger version of Discover, all right? But they do it to countries, whereas Discover just does it to individuals, small businesses, and the like. So now the Greek government, they're in trouble. They don't have enough money to pay back, to make the minimum payments on the loan, the credit card, to get the next blob of cash to come in. So now they're looking around. Well, what are we going to do? Where are we going to get all this money from? We're going to have to borrow it. Yeah, borrow. We're going to borrow it from the pension funds. And here's the kicker. I got to look at my other screen for a second here so I can read off this little quick list for you. Here, this is funny. Pension funds, public entities will be able to claim damages from the Greek state in case of overdue repayment, partial repayment, or non-repayment. Pension funds are not obliged to transfer their reserves to the Bank of Greece, according to the Finance Ministry statement. So basically, this kind of reads kind of like the Dodd-Frank bill. This is really a good thing, but it's really a bad thing. So what they're saying here is they're going to basically steal this money from these pension funds, and if they don't make the repayments on time, which they're not going to because they're broke.
Right. If
they're going to the IMF. So what are they going to do? Take money from the IMF to give to the pension funds so they can take it from pension funds to give it back to the IMF? Do you see how ridiculous this is?
Right.
But the bottom line in all this is who's the loser? It's the poor slob at the bottom of this just demented, disgusting food chain that is waiting for his pension check every month. And this is not the only place that this happened. And people, for the 95,000th time, it has already happened here in America. Look at Detroit. Look at the cut that they said. Well, it was only 4.5% no cost of living increases for the rest of your life. That's kind of a big deal.
Right.
Especially given the fact that they really didn't fix anything, and they had to give away all the city's crown jewels. They even gave away the Ark. The city owned this Ark, this collectible Ark, and it was valued whatever it was valued at. And they basically gave that away so that they could get out of this bankruptcy that the city of Detroit was in. So as a part of the settlement, the pensioners took this hit. So it's already happened here. Yeah, it's not 100% hit, and this is how this will happen. It starts small. Oh, it's only 4.5% in cost of living. Next thing you know, it'll be 10%. It'll be 20%. Detroit is already a blighted city.
Right.
The people there really don't have much to begin with. And as soon as I let that thing go, I had 4 or 5 people unsubscribe, and every one of them sent me hate mail saying that I was just sticking up for the unions and that those people were getting too much pension money to begin with, and that this was good because they were getting cut down to size level. You're short-sighted buffoons. You missed the point. Well, the point is it was stolen.
Andy, why is it? I mean, we know the problem that Greece has is the same problem on almost the same scale as every other European country has. The old argument would be, why don't we be more like France, where people get, 6 weeks vacation, paid vacation a year, and they only work so many hours a week, and et cetera, et cetera. And we're so mean that people work over 40 hours a week. People in small businesses work 50, 60, 70 hours. I'm always working. In fact, if I'm not working, I'm bored to death. But why aren't we more like them? And what we never hear is the fact that the lowest paid workers in Europe were people from France, because they're on vacation all the time. I mean, this was not free. And not only that, but it was unsustainable. And we never say that. Our news media will mention that, like, look how mean we are and look how benevolent the French government is. And then they go on to a commercial. But they don't say what the end game is. They never talk about the end game. Detroit is a microcosm of what is happening around the world. And why don't we say, hey, America, if you want to be like Detroit, let's continue doing what we're doing now. We can all live like people living in Detroit. But no, we blame somebody else. We blame some restriction on some government program because that's why people are poor. They don't want to talk about the cause. They just want to talk about the effects. And it drives me nuts. You never hear a darn word about any of this.
No, and the key to this whole thing is unsustainable.
Right.
And I got a couple more emails from some slightly more enlightened folks that made that exact point, and they're actually surprised. And I tell people, don't be surprised, because this is like one of those fairy tale movies where you have the dragon and the prince.
Yeah.
And when is the dragon at its most dangerous point? After it's been dealt a mortal blow, because it knows it's dying. And what's it try to do? It tries to take out the prince, right?
Right.
Like, what was that? The Sleeping Beauty? I don't know. Whatever. They have a dragon. The dragon. So, but that's exactly. There's a lot of truth to that with the way this whole system is. This whole system actually dealt itself the mortal blow because of its mere size. But people don't realize it yet because it's still kind of thrashing around. And, hey, the stock market's at 18,000 again. Well, tomorrow it could be at 16,000, and the next day it could be at 18,200. I mean, the volatility will give you a whiplash. These are false markers. I get this quarterly publication from the St. Louis Fed, and I like reading it, not because it's educational, but because I like to understand where the kind of nonsense slinging around so you can develop counterpoints to it. And there was an article about 2015 growth, and I don't have it right in front of me, so I can't read it verbatim. But the upshot was one of the biggest indicators for the fact that 2015 is going to be this great year economically speaking is the fact that the stock market is at 18,000. It's like, right. Seriously, right. You have a doctorate, some university, basically threw its reputation, under the horse and buggy, and got, got dumped on so that they could give you a PhD so you could go out there and use the stock market as a measure of economic health.
Right.
Seriously.
What's really interesting is that most economists and financial gurus who have doctorates in economics, because Eco 101, remember Econ 101, I forgot what we used to call it, Econ 101, right? They are so far removed from it, they forgot all the basics. It seems like, well, that was so long ago that I took that as a sophomore in college, but now I'm taking my doctorate. It's so long ago, I forgot what that said, and that's so old, it probably doesn't apply anymore. They don't apply the very, very basics. What bothers me is that why are we so afraid, why are we so reluctant, rather, to blame the individual? We always have to blame a system. We have to blame a corporation. We have to blame industry. We have to blame greed, whatever that's supposed to mean, If it wasn't for greed, no cars would drive on the highway because we'd all kill each other. No, greed says, I want to make sure I don't kill myself, so I'm going to stay in my lane and I'll signal when when everything is clear. That's greed to me, and that's good. Greed, and I think that that movie "Greed is Good" had a point. But we don't want to blame the individual who is working for 20 years and then getting a 45%, 55% pension for the rest of their life, and they're retiring at the age of 42 years old, and they do nothing, but they get another job and get another pension, and they're drawing from the system, and the job they had was probably next to worthless, and they did very little and produced very little, but we don't blame the individual. I know people with 3 pensions. They're living like a king, and they really never had a hard job in their life. I'm sorry for the diatribe.
Like I was. That's all right. Go ahead. Hey, why do you think the articles have as much sarcasm as they do? That's how I vent. That and here. Although if it wasn't for you and the ability to write articles and put them on the internet, I think I'd be in an insane asylum somewhere. But you know what the thing is, though, Joe? I mean, it's just like everything else. You take a bunch of 9th graders, all right? And I was in that system for a while. Taught business, economics, that kind of, not economics straight, because I wasn't allowed because I didn't have a history certificate. Go figure. I only have a master's with honors, but hey, whatever. That's how the system works. But you take a bunch of 9th grade kids and you do, I call it the inflation game, right? You get 2 identical sets of goods, some candy bars, some notebooks, pens, pencils, erasers, blah, blah, blah. You pass out the monopoly money in random amounts, and you have an auction. And you fix your money supply, right? And the kids bid, they get the stuff, you keep track of the prices. Then, like 2 weeks later or whatever, you do the same thing again, only you double the money supply that's circulated. Do the exact same experiment all over again. Guess what? They pay pretty close to double the prices. Right. They understand that the candy bar, the Butterfinger, didn't change. The Kit Kat is still a Kit Kat.
Right.
The Milky Way is still a Milky Way. What changed? The value of their currency.
That's
9th
right.
graders get that. You take a bozo, an absolute schmuck, like that guy Steve Leisman on CNBC. And yes,
Right.
Steve, I'm going to call you out because, first of all, you're nothing but a propagandist journalist. You're not an economist. You're not a scientist. You're a buffoon. All right? Somebody like that, Steve Leisman, will sit there and spout this garbage about the stock market and this garbage about phony unemployment numbers and this complete baloney that there's no spreading wealth gap or whatever you want to call it. They will sit there and they will just spew this and spew it. And the thing is, you go through this whole system. You start out in 9th grade, you understand things. By the time you get that doctorate, you wouldn't Butterfinger from a hole in the ground if you had a label.
Yeah.
That's how it works.
But what's interesting about the Butterfinger analogy is that the second time when you give them twice as much money, right, the Butterfinger went from 8 ounces to 6 ounces, and they're actually getting less. And no one realizes. So you're paying twice as much, but getting even less on a proportion basis. But no one questions that.
It's like the half-gallon ice cream is not a half-gallon anymore. The bag of chips used to be 16 ounces. Now it's like 11 and a half ounces. Yeah, people don't notice that. But these bozos, and this is how you have institutionalized stupidity, because you have these people that go through these universities, and I went through, and I don't know why the good Lord spared me the ignorance of some of these other folks, but they go, the further you go in this system, I swear, the dumber you get. And you have these people at Bureau of Labor Statistics, they calculate the CPI, and now we have a chain-weighted CPI, and they come up with all these machinations and all this gobbledygook to prevent them from having to say, you know what, you're paying 30% more for 20% less.
Right.
They try and make it sound like you're paying 30% less for 20% more.
Yeah.
And if you know what, you take a bunch of fancy math and a bunch of formulas and so forth, you can make the numbers say that. You really can. And that's exactly what these people do. They're like, they're like the Wizard of Oz. They sit there and it comes in, they're like the alchemists. They tried to make the gold out of lead, but they can't make gold. All they can make is fool's gold covered lead. That's the best they've been able to do, because anybody with a half a brain knows that a trip to the grocery store costs a whole lot more than it used to, and you're walking out with a whole lot less.
Oh, yeah. And, restaurants, my wife and I used to, I tell you, I am so bad. I remember 20 years ago, my wife and I used to go to this taco place, and I kid you not, I can tell you how much. And we used to both get a little, they had a mini taco thing, and we used to do our after business work there, and stay there and had a good time and meet friends. And I remember we used to spend $3.41 total for both of us. Now, I defy you to go any place and spend $3 to eat anything, even one hot dog for one person. And my wife and I realized recently that, although, she works late and I'm always running around, so a lot of times we got to eat, it's just becoming very unaffordable. I mean, we can't go out and eat and get a bill for less than $25, $30, even for something very simple. I said, this is not sustainable. We can't spend hundreds and hundreds of dollars a month just on dinner. This doesn't make any sense. So we decided one day not to go out to dinner. We went to the natural grocers to buy food. And even that bill was $84, but we did get at least several meals, and we proportioned it out. It was infinitely less. Everything is more expensive. We purchased a Sleep Number bed recently, and the guy told us that the salesman said, don't pay cash. He says it's two years, pay it out, same as cash. It's interest free. I said, no, that can't be. He says, it is. So I wanted to test it. I never put anything on credit if I can avoid it. I buy everything for cash. And so I said, okay, I'll do it. Well, I got the papers, received the papers in the mail about 5 days later, and it said, here are the terms of repayment. Should you miss one payment, one day, your interest rates go to, listen to this is a beauty, 29.99%. And I said to myself, how many people are going to make every payment for 2 years, never be late, and if they ever miss, they'll make more money on interest than they do on the mattress.
Yeah, and the thing is, say you're, 20 months into the 24 months and you miss the payment, you're not just responsible for the last 4 months of interest, they get you for all of it.
I didn't know that.
You know
oh, my goodness.
We had a deal. This was like 10 years ago. Yeah, we bought a treadmill, and they had the same kind of thing. 2 years, same as cash. Well, I thought, all right, I can do that. I had the money, but okay. So we're making the payments, and we're like 6, 7, 8 months in, I guess, or whatever. And I'm noticing I'm getting the bills closer and closer to the due date, and the postmarks are changing. They're getting closer and closer to the due date. So it wasn't the post office. It was actually the finance company that was trying to induce me to make a late payment so that they could do what we just described. Yeah. So I sent them a severe letter along with a copy to the Attorney General in the state of Pennsylvania here, and a check for the whole balance of the caboodle there that we owed on the treadmill. But yeah, I mean, that's it. I'd sit these kids. I was telling you about these 9th grade kids, or 10th grade or seniors, whatever. You tell them these things, and they look at you. And one kid, honest to God, said to me, "That can't happen. This is America." I'm like sitting there wanting to beat my head against the brick wall.
Right. Right. That only happens in those foreign countries,
Yeah, like Greece, right?
Yeah, right.
Like Detroit.
Oh, I got to tell you, the upshot of the whole thing is that as soon as I got received the bill, I paid the entire thing off. I think the day I received the bill, it was in the mail, right? And I paid the entire amount. Then I got a bill for $329, and we can't figure out what it's for. We can't figure it out. No one can figure it out. We went to the Sleep Number people and said, we have no idea what it's for. I said, we paid the whole bill. And now we're in this thing back and forth of trying to find out why we owe $329 or whatever it is when we pay the entire bill the day that we received it. And anyway, and this will go on forever. It'll eventually be $10,000 in interest charges, and I'll be in debtor's prison, But and I'll be sleeping. But I'll be sleeping very well. I hope the prison has Sleep Number beds on. I'm getting used to it.
Yeah. It's probably one of those deals where they penalize you if you pay early.
Yeah, and probably I got penalized for paying early, right? Let me ask you another thing. How patient do you feel? I mean, the FOMC is being, they dropped the word patient out of their dialogue, and so I guess they're not so patient anymore. And now they're analyzing the comments that Janet Yellen, the Fed chairman, said about interest rates. She said basically the same thing, but left the word patient out. And now you have all sorts of dialogue going back and forth from all these talking heads as to what that really means, because she won't say what she means.
Well, here's the thing. I don't know this for a fact, but I'd be willing to bet on it that, and I'm not a bettor, but I would bet on this. Those comments are probably very carefully prepared in advance, obviously.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
And analyzed by psychologists. I would bet on it.
Psychiatrists, not financial people, but shrinks, right?
I bet you they got a whole art. And that's probably
the
one
best
of the
shrinks money can buy. I know. Okay.
Yeah, that was probably one of the things that was in that, in that TARP thing there. They had to provide a bunch of money to hire, the Dr. Phils of the world to go down there and analyze her comments, and then the bozo, the Barbasol man there before her. To figure out what these guys were actually saying and how it was gonna play out. I'm sure, the banks, I would be sure that they have people that are paid just to sit there and analyze comments that are made by these guys. That's the ones that don't have, a direct line.
Yeah.
I'm sure they do, because the markets move on this garbage. That's why they're not markets.
Yeah,
that's why you can't invest.
Yeah, and that's
why everything is a gamble.
That's right. Well, I'm in the same room with Peter Schiff in that the Fed cannot raise rates. They say that they will or they may. They just can't, because they can't afford it. I mean, they can't afford what they have now. They're still turning over bonds. They're still growing at $500 billion a month, whatever it is, $1 million a month, right? Not billion, $1 million a month, I guess it is. So they can't possibly raise rates, but they talk about it, and it'll never happen. If the economy keeps on going the way it is going, and demographically, if you just take demographics, that's where we're going, and you can't reverse that. You can't change demographics overnight. It takes generations. It looks like we're going to head in that direction, which means we're never going to have a raise in interest rates, which means money will be cheap. But I want to ask you about the carry trade.
It should be cheap because it's not worth anything.
Right. I want to ask. We're going to stop for station identification, and before we do, I'd like to remind our listeners: please do call in if you have any questions for Andy. Don't feel embarrassed that concerned that you're interfering or cutting off the conversation. Call us on toll-free 888-773-4496. That's 888-773-4496 with your questions. Your number will appear on the board. Press the one button and we'll put you on the air, and you can ask any questions you'd like of Andy, okay? And Andy, if you just hold on a minute, we will stop for station identification, okay? A little break, and we'll be back in a minute.
You're listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Political talk derived from a historical perspective. Not always palatable, but good food for thought. Pure libertarian talk with host Joe Cristiano. LibertyTalkRadio.com.
Express Test is your go-to company for on-site occupational health testing services. That's right, we said on-site. That means we will meet you at your facility for a free health and occupational safety consultation. Express Test specializes in hearing conservation, respiratory protection, and employee safety. We can help you establish viable programs tailored to your business and employee needs. For your free consultation, call 918-743-2929 or visit us at expresstest.com. That's 918-743-2929 or expresstest.com. Do you find yourself asking, what did you say? Aaron Cristiano of Ranch Acres Audiology has over 25 years of experience helping patients just like you.
Hearing requires conservation. We need to be aware and we need to be responsible for our own hearing health.
Understand more with a little help from Ranch Acres Audiology. Call 918-749-7711. That's 918-749-7711 to learn more. We'd like to thank attorney Constance Squires for her support of Liberty Talk Radio. If you want a comprehensive way to affordably avoid legal issues, call Constance Squires for a free consultation. Call 918-254-9283 or go online at isthyWillDone.com.
This isn't your typical talk radio show. This is Liberty Talk Radio.
By the way, folks, 888-773-4496. Andy Sutton loves to take your calls. Don't be embarrassed. Call in. There's no such thing as a stupid question. We want to hear from you. The Wall Street Journal.
Hey, Joe, give me a second here. Since we have video, I'm going to make a one-time offer. If somebody calls in during the next half hour or however much we have left, I will actually get up out of my chair and I will dance a jig. How's that?
Okay, let's see Andy dance a jig.
Somebody calls in, Andy's going to dance. How's that?
773-4496. I'd love to see that. Please, someone, I'll pay somebody to call in. Call in. I want to see it. I'll give you $5, okay?
That's all that's worth.
I read the Wall Street Journal now that the banks are struggling to unload the oil bonds, oil loans, the bonds, and now, I had read some time ago that this could be the impetus behind the busting of the bond bubble, because about 1/3 of the loans outstanding are oil or oil related, and because of the precipitous drop in the price of crude, many of these companies are folding tent, laying people off, stopping production, and this can be the prick into the bond bubble. What's your opinion of that?
You know what the really interesting thing about that is, and I did read that. Remember back in 2008 and 2009, the same thing happened. Oil was fairly high. It went up to $151 a barrel at its high point or something like that.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And then it dropped all the way down to $33. All right, that was an 80% drop. You didn't hear a word about the threatening of the petrodollar.
That's
at
right.
that point.
That's right. You're absolutely correct.
See, this is how this thing is like a snowball. See, back then, that wasn't really that big of a deal. Yeah, a few speculators got nailed or whatever. Everybody's a speculator now, by the way. If I'm gonna take my hard-earned money, I'm gonna make a tangent here real quick, and invest it based on whether some dunce from the Federal Reserve says the word patient or not, I think that makes me a speculator.
I can't understand why you're out of this business.
See, that's exactly why. It's good. But anyway, getting back to the point you made, you didn't hear anything about the threatening of the petrodollar back in 2008. And this is one of the reasons why there's a couple of ways this whole oil thing could be interpreted. Now, you've heard in the media that it's kind of like the U.S.'s play against Russia to drive their economy down and so forth by flooding the market more with gas than oil. And that's going to hurt Gazprom and its monopoly. There's only one problem with that. They got the pipelines, and we haven't had enough wars yet to get the pipelines where we need them to pull that stunt off.
Right.
That's what the whole Syria thing is all about. It's all about a pipeline. It's the same thing as Iraq, Afghanistan. You look, go online, go on Google or Yahoo or whatever, and find yourself a map of where our military bases are in the Middle East, and then find a map of where the pipelines are in the Middle East and do an overlay and see what you get.
Yeah. That's interesting.
It's obvious. It's the petrodollar is the whole kit and caboodle here. Now, that's the whole deal right there, the whole enchilada wrapped up into one.
Do you think that the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, the AIIB, which is being established by, I believe, China, which has already enlisted the UK and several European nations as a competitor to the IMF and the World Bank, you think that's a game changer in any way, where we see money going from the West to the East, as they talk about?
Yeah, I think what you're going to see is, and again, it's like everything else, it's going to happen gradually. There's no benefit. And this is why I detest, a lot of these people that try to make a living off saying that you need to, do this and that and the other thing because the system's going to crash tomorrow morning. Unless something totally off the wall happens, like the tip of the black swan, to use Taleb's term, unless that happens, this thing is going to be very gradual because it's not in anybody's best interest to have it just implode. Because guess what? The Chinese have a lot of dollars, and they'd like to be able to get rid of those dollars in a semi-orderly fashion. I think they're willing to take some loss, but like you said before, guess what? They're just as greedy as we are. And they want to get as much as they can for those dollars, just like you and I want to get as much as we can when we go to the grocery store or the car lot or any other place. All right, so it's in nobody's best interest for this thing to just go boom overnight. So what you're seeing here is kind of like this peeling away, if you will, of partners. The UK was obviously a big partner, UK, London, New York kind of thing going on. So that's kind of a big deal right there. The ones to really watch are Germany, in my opinion, and there's probably others that would give differing opinions, and that's fine, are Germany and Saudi Arabia. Germany, because they're the main producer in the Eurozone. Right. They do the producing. They're not the slackers. All right, the Greeks, the rest of them, the Spaniards, the French, they're basically the slackers of the Eurozone. The ones that are in trouble. The Germans, they have the strong hand in the EU. And then you have Saudi Arabia, which is kind of the pivot point in this whole petrodollar, thing between the United States and then the BRICS, China, Russia, India, Brazil. So I think those two it's going to be very important and critical to watch what the two of them do. Not what they say, because everybody says one thing and they do something else. Pay no attention to what they're saying. Watch what they're doing. Right. And that's where this whole thing right now that's going on between U.S., Russia, China, and this whole thing with oil. Saudi Arabia is kind of down here. They're right in the middle of this thing. They're the pivot point. People will say that, hey, it's the U.S. and the U.S. banks trying to crush Russia. And then there's others that'll say, hey, the Saudis are really turning tail on the United States, and they think the Russians are going to be on them. The Chinese are going to be on the winning side of this thing. So they're going there. Right, yeah. And they're driving the price down to crush North American shale oil, shale gas. And guess what? The area I live in here in Pennsylvania it's not a severely heavy area for the Marcellus shale. The shales are relatively thin here compared to some of the other areas east of here and south. But there's a lot of drilling that's been going on, and what I've been hearing locally here is that the firms are laying people off.
Right, that's correct.
A couple people have told me that relatives, family members, whatnot, friends have lost jobs because companies are pulling out, or they're just going dormant and they're waiting to see what happens with prices. If prices go up, because their wells aren't profitable at these prices. So we're starting to suffer from this. Yeah, I'm not sure how big this is. What kind of a scale this is on, but at least at some level, the United States is suffering from this. Now, I don't know what's going on in North Dakota or anything like that. I don't get boots on the ground information from out there, unfortunately. But at least here in Pennsylvania, we're seeing some of these ripple effects starting to hit the local areas.
Well, many of the roughnecks, I guess the ones that they work on rigs and whatever, those jobs are paying over $50,000 a year, some over $75,000 a year. When they get laid off, I mean, they are going on unemployment, or we're going to find them in Walmart. So it's going to have this effect of pushing down wages even further than they are now. What sort of bothers me is that the United States wants to influence the political arena in Europe, and they use oil, for example, as one piece of leverage. What really bothers me is decades ago, the excuse of the United States being involved in Europe, especially the Middle East, was because we were dependent partially on Saudi Arabia and other countries for oil. And we really wouldn't bother with Europe or the Middle East if we were energy independent. Well, we became energy independent, and we became even more aggressive in our involvement in Europe. And when will people see that everything that they're being told is a lie, is a ruse, it's an excuse, it's something to distract us, from the real reason why we do. We can impose sanctions on anyone for any stupid reason at all. I'm waiting for some small countries, innocuous small country, to impose sanctions on the United States. I want to see what the response would be on that.
Well, see, the problem is they don't want to get bombed. And that's really the bottom line here. I mean, that is, we don't have trading power anymore. We don't have currency. Even though the dollar is still, I'm not even going to call it a reserve currency because there's no reserve. It's the term itself. The term
is passé, right?
Yeah. The dollar is still the prevalent currency. That's been undercut by a great deal, notwithstanding. But even there, we don't have currency power. So what do we have left? Bombs.
Military power, right.
Yeah, military power. Yeah, we can reach out, and that's why we have these bases all over the world. We're like the Roman Empire.
That's right.
They had all these outposts. And what happened eventually? Well, maybe not everybody, but it fell because of that. It stretched itself too thin. The people at home were worried about bathhouses, bread and circuses, and all that kind of nonsense. Production went down, and the whole thing collapsed.
Right.
And that's exactly what we're playing out here. The only reason that we've been able to play this thing out as long as we have, there's two big factors that I think play into this. Technology has helped us do it, and ignorance.
Right.
By the public. Technology has helped in tremendous ways, but at the end of the day, technology does not offset laziness. And we've become a lazy nation.
Right.
You look at it, you talk to people, talk to employers. They want to hire a worker. And, they look at the pool of available people, and nobody wants to work. Everybody wants to sit at home and watch cable TV all day and collect the government check. And you can't do that. You can for a while. And, maybe with the system we have in place now, we'll be able to do it a little bit longer than somebody else, like maybe Greece. But eventually it's going to stop. And I don't know when that's going to be. Nobody does. But eventually it's going to stop. You don't just get to consume all the time. Yeah. Somebody's got to produce.
Yeah. There are so many mainstream commentators that will blame all of this on the breakup for the reduction in the number of union workers, where at one time union workers were making a very good salary, middle income salary, able to afford to raise families, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And as a result, America was rich. We don't have unions anymore. These people are making less money. They can't afford. And they blame it all on the fact that the unions are no longer prevalent in industry. And they had that all backwards. The result of industry, of the world changing, made unions basically anti-productive, where at one time after World War II, obviously, there was no industrial capacity. We were the only country with industrial capacity. We could have charged anything to anyone for any product and had pensions and paid people a phenomenal salary, would have made no difference. But as soon as other countries started to become competitive, we became uncompetitive, rendering unions actually uneconomical. And it's not that large corporations want to make more money and they want to crush the union, which they do want to do because unions are stupid because they impede productivity and flexibility in the workplace. And we need that today on a day-to-day basis. They want everything staying the same. And if you want to make a change, you have to go through expensive contortions, and you can never get what you want to get done in order to get the product out in the first place. So countries move overseas, and I don't blame them. And not that I'm pro-union, anti-union. I'm just I'm pro productivity and individual achievement. And we have taken the individual out altogether. We never blame the individual for doing wrong. We never give credit to the individual for doing right. It's always society or government. Someone else is doing it for them. The individual means nothing today, and that really bothers me.
Well, it's one of those things. You look at back, with the unions. When the unions first started, with the Knights of Labor and the AFL-CIO and when all that started, what were the main reasons why the unions were formed? Well, it was because, they had kids working and, they were working 60, 70 hours a week and that kind of stuff. Well, now the government stepped in and basically took away, that purpose of the unions for existing and said, well, the work week's going to be 40 hours. And if you work over that and you're an hourly worker, you're entitled to time and a half, blah, 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 blah. And, you got child labor laws and all this kind of stuff. So they basically took that role away from the unions. So now what's the union's purpose for existing? Well, you remember, the union's an organization just like the company that it's kind of, engaged in battle against. You got fat cats in the union. And, I grew up in a union household. And you hear stories about these union fat cats, having these big, fancy things while the guys they were supposed to represent, be represented were getting the shaft.
Right.
So, they outlived their usefulness. There's certainly situations where, they have a use, but I agree with you. You take a look at like the biggest one is the teachers union, in my opinion. That's the biggest idiotic thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Yeah. Did you know, speaking of pensions and unions, if you were a teacher in the state of Pennsylvania, and I did not do this, by the way, because I didn't stick around long enough because I got sick of it, but I get sick of things. The way that pension system is set up is the person kicks in, it's like 7.25% or something like that. And then the school district that they're working for, they kick in another 7.25%. And you do this for, 25, 30 years, and then the person retires. Now, normally you retire and you start getting a check every month, right?
Right.
Okay, well, here's what they can do in Pennsylvania. When you retire, you can get a slightly smaller check than you would have otherwise, and you can take out every dime that you've ever contributed into the system plus 4% interest per annum. What do you think of that?
Wow.
You can take out, all that's 7.5% that you put in every pay for 30 years plus 4% a year interest. You can take every penny of that out of the system, get a nice big old check, dump it into an IRA or whatever, have the taxes taken out and buy an island somewhere, whatever, and still get like a check every month, still get your monthly pension, and it's like 92% of what you would have gotten if you left your money in the system. It is absurd.
To me, that's you know what?
A system like that is going to be.
I work for a fully integrated oil company, and after 25 years, I had other jobs, but because I'm an old guy now, I had many jobs. And I did hang on for 25 years, and they closed the location down. I had a good job there. And you know what? My pension is my net pension is only a few $100 a month, and I'm grateful for it. Believe me, I'm not complaining. I'm not complaining at all. But when I hear some of these teacher pensions of $78,000 a year, it blows my mind because they taught the first grade and the whole bit. I mean, and they're dedicated and they're good teachers and the whole bit. But it just doesn't deserve that. Then we want to know why we cannot fund the pensions any longer and why the states are in debt to the tune of trillions of dollars. Well, we have to look at ourselves. We caused this. I mean, we say, oh, geez, there's free money. There's no free lunch anywhere. And yet we just keep on
rolling
that way.
That's another thing speaking of the states, that was another thing that was in this idiot's column from the regional economist, that Fed journal I was talking about earlier. He made the comment that municipal financial health has gotten much better over the past few years. Where's this guy coming from? You got more people on the dole every month, food stamps, whatever, these programs are all at record highs in terms of what they're paying out. You've got less and less workers. Yeah, there's more jobs, but look at the quality. The quality stinks. They're all at the bottom of the lowest quartile,
right,
in terms of pay and so forth. Like, we're not creating great jobs. We're creating these mediocre, $10, $11, $12, $15 an hour jobs, and you can't really run a household on $10 to $15 an hour. I mean, you can, but it's pretty tough, and you certainly can't afford all these things that you see everywhere, like these $25 and $30 a sitting, lunch for two kind of places, these little cookie cutter dumps that they keep building everywhere. You can't afford fine clothing. You can't afford a nice car. Guess what? The whole thing is still fueled by debt. And these morons in all these government agencies, the Commerce Department, Bureau of Labor Statistics, the Federal Reserve, they've all got this mindset that, as long as we can keep this debt engine going, it's the little engine that could. It's the big debt engine. It'll climb any hill, right? I don't know. I don't think so. This thing keeps just getting bigger and bigger. You look at consumer debt; it's still going up. Student loans are going up. Car loans are going up. Oh, we sold a record number of cars and light trucks. Right. Since 2008 in the last quarter, the guy cited. Yeah, and they're not being paid for with cash. They're being paid for on credit. It's all based on cheap money, and it should be cheap because it's not worth a doggone thing.
Well, what's going to happen with what about the car bubble, the car loan bubble? I mean, those loans are starting to default at an accelerated pace, and there's billions of dollars outstanding there. People riding around in new cars that I would never spend the money for, and I can afford to buy one, but I wouldn't. I went to see a Chevy Volt recently, and of course they didn't have one in the showroom. They had one in the back lot, and it took them a half hour to start it because the batteries were dead. I'm not kidding you. And then it's funny, I read an article that someone had the same experience I did, word for word. It's almost as if I wrote the article. He said he went to a Chevy dealership, and there were no regular cars on the showroom floor, only Corvettes and high-end Camaros, and it's exactly what I experienced. There were 3 Corvettes. Cheapest one was $67,000, and the most expensive car on the showroom floor was a Camaro for $76,700 or something like that, and a 700 horsepower engine. Those were the 4 cars on this gigantic showroom, and when I asked for Chevy Volt, it took them a half hour to get one because the batteries were dead. It was in the back, and then he told me how many they sell that they can't keep them in stock. I come on. And so I asked, I said, well, how much for this small little dinky little car with a 40 horsepower engine? He said, you can buy for only $37,000. But of course, no money down and zero this, zero that, zero this, And, I said, thank you very much. And I walked out. This is the bizarro, crazy world that we live in. We have a few minutes. Just give me your speculation as to where are we going? Because people ask me, Joe, what should I do with my money? And of course, I don't give financial advice out. I just say protect your money and don't have garbage. But could you be more erudite than that? Than I am?
Well, yeah. Pointing back to the car loan, this is the thing. And you said you just nailed it. You talked about the mattress, no money down. 24 months, same as cash, right? You talked about the car. I don't know, probably minimum payment, trade in, whatever. Zero down, zero payments for 3 months, zero maintenance, zero registration, and zero interest. By the way, 5 zeros. Okay. I had the 5 zeros. Okay, so for everything zero. Guess what? That is the only way this continues.
That's right.
This is why, and they have to. You know what? If they could charge 5% interest, do you think they would? Of course they would.
Sure. Guess
what? They can't. Right. They can't sell the garbage if they don't give it out for free.
Right.
0%, 0%, 0%. This is why the Fed will never raise interest rates.
Right.
They can't. And you know what? That witch, that white-haired witch in San Francisco, she's the wicked witch of the West. She knows it. Bernanke, the Barbasol boy, he knew it.
Right.
Greenspan with his irrational exuberance.
I remember that one, yeah. Oh, gee, that brings back memories.
Smart boy. He knew it. They all know it. All these bozos they get on TV, they all know it. They are never going to raise rates. They'll talk and they'll take the word patient out,
right,
and they'll do all this stuff. They are not going to raise interest rates because they can't.
Right. Well,
if that loan, and that $76,000 Camaro was 5% interest, how about 9%, maybe 10%, maybe 15%? What if we went back to the Volcker area and the Fed funds rate was 20%? How much of this stuff do you think would move? None of it would move.
That's right. Well, I was very fortunate. I bought my house, and I got a very low interest rate when I bought my house back in 74, and it was 8.75%, and that was considered good at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And my payments, were $220.26 a month. That didn't include the taxes and the insurance, but the whole thing didn't run more than $300 or so. Amazing. And it's a 2,700 square foot house. Today, it's off the page. But I'll tell you, my next car. Let me tell you, my next car is going to be. It's going to be a 1970 Camaro with a 427 4-speed, 411 rear positive traction. And a straight axle front end. That's what I want to have, and plenty of noise and no air conditioning.
That's right. You can't beat a classic, man. You're going to buy a car, buy a classic.
That's right. And it'll just go up in value every year. All right. We have about 3 minutes, Andy. Will give us some closing comments and how people can reach you if you'd like them to do that, please.
Well, first of all, as far as like where we're going to go, this is going to continue. You're going to see more low interest rates, more of the same thing. We're going to build, shopping centers, strip malls, restaurants, basically service industry type stuff. This whole thing with the gas and oil right now is kind of a little bit of a wild card. We got to see what happens there. But this whole thing is going to continue. People are going to go further and further into debt, some out of desire because they just want, some out of necessity because they don't have jobs. They're off the unemployment rolls, and therefore, according to the BLS, they're employed now, and this sort of thing. So the theme is going to be more debt, more debt, more debt, more debt, more student loan debt, more credit card debt, all across the board, more debt, less production, strong dollar, yeah, right, strong compared to garbage, maybe. But the problem with that is that hurts the export economy. So what little exports we do,
right,
that's going to hinder that. Now it's going to make the foreign goods comparatively cheaper. So it's going to hinder us in that way. So it's this race to the bottom. The Fed doesn't really want a strong dollar. The problem is they can't compete with the euro crash landing right now. Basically doing this really steep dive. So you're going to see all this stuff continue. Stock market, who knows? Volatility out the wazoo, like it's been for the last 6 or 8 months here. If I was anybody that had any kind of money, I'd look across my balance sheet and see if there was any debt, and I'd pay it off. The majority of Americans are debt slaves,
right?
And
that's
they
what
don't
I
even
do.
realize.
I'm constantly paying off debt, constantly.
They get up in the morning, they go off to work. Why? Not so they can do this, do that, or do the other thing. So they can pay this bank, pay that bank, pay this finance company, pay somebody else. They're wage slaves. They don't even realize it. That's my job here, hopefully, and yours. I know you're into this too. Is to wake these people up to the fact that hey, you're being enslaved. And let's not mince words here. You're being enslaved. The articles, the one on the pensions is out. It's available. I'm actually writing one right now. It's about half done. Hopefully it comes out in the next day or so. It's actually a little slice of Medicare. It's an area of medicine that I'm familiar with. And just to get the size of the scope of the problem with Medicare, we're going to take a look at one little piece, one itty-bitty little minuscule piece that most people probably would never think about. And that, I'm hoping, will enable people to see the scope of the magnitude of the problems facing just Medicare alone. So that should be out in the next couple of days. You want to reach me, you can go to andysutton.com. That'll take you back to my company's website. The company is not an advisor anymore. Unfortunately, I've got all these articles that are linked back to it, so I don't want to just get rid of it because people are constantly reading the articles, so I kind of have to keep that around. But andysutton.com, real easy, one word, bam. We'll get you there, and you can take a look, subscribe to 2 cents. That comes out, whenever I get some free time, basically. And there's a quarterly sensible investor there. If people want to send a contribution to try and keep the bandwidth and research subscriptions paid for, I much appreciate it. Thank you for your contribution, by the way. And as always, thank you for having me on Liberty Talk Radio.
Thank you so much for being our guest today, Andy. I do hope you accept our invitation to return the third Thursday of next month, if you're available.
That sounds like a plan.
Okay, Andy, here. Thank you so much. Good luck.
Nobody made me dance.
That's right. Well, we had a couple people online, and I thought they were going to press the one button, but they never did. You said
I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to see me dance either.
Okay. You take care. Thank you so much.
You too, Joe. Bye now.
Bye now. Oh, jeez. Here we go. Where's the music? There we go. Folks, this is the end of today's broadcast. We'd like to thank our sponsors for the financial support, and we'd like to thank you for listening in. You can further the cause of liberty by recommending this program to your friends, but let us hear from you. Our email address is comments@libertytalkradio.com. Folks, you're either allowing your liberties to be taken away or you're striving to protect them. Unfortunately, there is no middle ground. Until next time, this is Joe Cristiano. You've been listening to Liberty Talk Radio. Stay well. Stay tuned. Why did it get so low?